Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you're a focused learner looking to understand exactly how a medical breakthrough transforms from a laboratory concept into an actual approved reality, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to look at this whole process through the lens of high-stakes architecture. Because, bringing a new drug or medical device to market isn't just about having good science. It's really about how you build, structure, and present that science to the world.
Okay, let's dive right into this. It's a question that literally keeps pharmaceutical executives and researchers awake at night. What actually stands between a breakthrough cure and the patients who desperately need it? Well, the answer is the regulatory dossier. You can kind of think of the dossier as the ultimate boss battle in the life cycle of a medical product. It is the master key to the market. Without it, the greatest medical innovation in the world remains, well, just an experiment. Just like a high-quality dossier requires a crystal-clear table of contents to guide regulators, our explainer needs a structured agenda to guide us today. First, we'll cover the master key to approval. Then, the anatomy of a dossier. Next up, the 6-step blueprint. After that, we'll look at overcoming submission obstacles, and finally, we'll wrap up with tools and best practices.
All right, part 1, the master key to approval and why these dossiers matter so much.
To really understand what we're building and why the stakes for getting these new products approved are just astronomically high, we need to lay down our foundation. A regulatory dossier is a comprehensive document submitted to regulatory authorities, like the FDA in the US or the EMA over in Europe, to basically obtain approval for a new drug, biologic, or medical device. But I want you to look past the word document for a second. This is definitely not a mere paperwork exercise. This is the foundational evidence of a product's efficacy, safety, and quality. It's the complete, documented proof that what you've built actually works, and most importantly, won't harm the public.
Moving on to part 2, the anatomy of a dossier, laying the foundation.
Let's look at the actual floor plan of this massive construction project. What are the structural pillars holding this whole thing up? And this brilliantly illustrates how 5 distinct pillars organize what is frankly an overwhelming amount of raw data into a highly readable, logical structure. First up, you have administrative information, so your forms and your table of contents. Second is quality documentation, specifically chemistry, manufacturing, and controls, or CMC, which proves you can make the product consistently. Third, nonclinical reports, detailing all that preclinical and animal testing. Fourth, the absolutely massive clinical study reports, holding the human trial data on safety and efficacy. And finally, labeling information, covering your packaging and patient leaflets. Every single piece of data has to fit perfectly into one of these specific rooms.
Now, you might be wondering, why obsess over this structure? Well, because a high-quality dossier has a massive, direct business impact. It establishes immediate credibility with regulatory authorities, it ensures total transparency, and perhaps most importantly for the bottom line, it significantly reduces the time to market. A well-built, perfectly structured dossier actively speeds up the review process because regulators aren't spending months trying to decipher a confusing floor plan. They can just walk right in and see the evidence for themselves.
That brings us to section 3, the 6-step blueprint, constructing the dossier.
Let's shift our energy over to the actual construction phase. Building this skyscraper of data requires strict adherence to an exact 6-step process. Here's your macro view of the entire build. We start with understanding regulatory requirements, move to planning, then data collection, onto writing, reviewing, and finally, submission. We're going to zoom in on each of these steps right now to see exactly how they guarantee the structural integrity of your final product.
Looking closely at step 1 and 2, there's actually a really fascinating contrast here between the external and the internal. Step 1 is entirely external. You have to dive deep into specific guidance documents and stay continuously updated on frequent regulatory changes. You basically have to know the rules of the land you're building on. Step 2, however, is purely internal. This is your planning and organization. It's where you define your objectives, lay down realistic timelines, and assemble a highly skilled team of experts across regulatory affairs, clinical research, and quality assurance.
Then we hit step 3, data collection and analysis. This is where things get real. You've got to compile all that thorough clinical trial data and guarantee its absolute integrity, authenticity, and reliability. But here's the secret. You must present this complex data clearly using tables, charts, and graphs. Throwing raw, unformatted data into a pile and just handing it to a regulator, yeah, that's a guaranteed recipe for rejection. It has to be highly digestible.
Which leads us perfectly into step 4, the actual writing and compiling.
The source material hit the nail on the head here, saying avoid jargon and make sure your writing is understandable. Maintain a formal tone throughout the document. This step is all about transforming collected data into a coherent, convincing narrative. You've got to stick to the structured format prescribed by the authority, all while maintaining crystal clear professional clarity.
Okay, step 5. Think of this as your vital building inspection. Before you open the doors, you need a rigorous review and quality check. This involves an internal review by colleagues who are totally uninvolved in the preparation, people who can offer fresh eyes. You might even bring in external consultants for a completely unbiased review. Finally, quality assurance does one last sweeping check to ensure complete compliance. You absolutely want to find any structural flaws before the regulators do.
And finally, step 6, submission and follow-up. Today, this obviously means submitting electronically. But cutting the ribbon at the grand opening isn't the end of the job. You have to actively track your submission status via the regulatory body's systems, and you must be fully prepared to provide additional information the very moment they ask for it.
All right, let's pivot a bit to Section 4, overcoming submission obstacles, or basically stormproofing your build.
Of course, no major construction project goes off without a hitch, so it's time to stormproof your build. Now, what's really interesting here is how clearly we can map out this problem-solution matrix for regulatory affairs. Look at these challenges. Complex regulations across different countries can lead to massive compliance failures, which you can only solve by deeply understanding specific market frameworks. Managing huge volumes of data causes total confusion unless you implement robust data management systems. But look at that bottom one, data inconsistency. This is a massive threat. Inconsistencies across different sections of your dossier will lead to costly delays or full-blown rejections. The only solution there is relentless cross-referencing and rigorous quality checks. Which brings us to our final section, number 5, tools and best practices, the final polish.
So, how on earth do you manage all this without dropping the ball? Well, you don't build the skyscraper with just a hand hammer, and you definitely cannot build a regulatory dossier with just a simple word processor. You need specialized heavy machinery. For document management, the industry relies on heavy hitters like Viva Vault and Master Control. For data analysis, tools like SAS and R are pretty much invaluable. Furthermore, leveraging industry resources like the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, or RAPS, alongside research platforms like PubMed and clinicaltrials.gov, provides the absolute foundation of knowledge required for success. So, the crucial point here really comes down to this stark contrast. The ultimate best practice? Quality over quantity. You must provide the most relevant data concisely and clearly. The absolute worst practice, on the other hand, is information dumping. Overwhelming regulators with bloated, unstructured information doesn't make you look smarter, guys. It just frustrates the reviewer and bogs down the entire approval process. And, going hand in hand with that quality is total transparency. You literally cannot hide your flaws. You have to maintain complete transparency about your data's limitations, because trying to hide things will absolutely destroy your credibility. Furthermore, a real hallmark of a highly successful submission is engaging early with regulators. Don't wait until the very end to guess what they want. Consult with them early in the process to clarify any uncertainties. Which leaves us with this final, really important question. Knowing the immense structure, strategy, and precision this takes, how will you approach your next submission? Are you going to view dossier preparation merely as a bureaucratic burden, just a mountain of paperwork to slog through, or will you embrace it as the ultimate architectural feat of scientific translation? A high-quality dossier is the literal bridge between incredible science and the patients who need it most. Build it well. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.